One of the best strategies you can use in real estate to make more money on the same deal is by selling that property instead of for cash or as a wholesale deal, instead selling it with seller financing. In this video, I'm going to share exactly how seller financing works and how you can do this from the comfort of your home on any deal that you want to. So there's a lot of misunderstandings in real estate that exist, that people think that in order to do seller financing, you have to be the bank. There's also a bunch of regulations that exist in real estate that say that when you do more than 3 seller financing house deals, you have to go and do all kinds of things, like you have to get a mortgage originator's license, you have to jump through all kinds of hoops, you have to keep the payment of the seller below a certain range. All those things are true, but there's a loophole that I'm going to share with you right now that allows you to jump outside of that and do as many seller financing deals that you ever want without being restricted by anything having to do with Dodd-Frank or SAFE Act or anything like that. Let's get right into it. Okay, so let's first explain what seller financing is. Seller financing is very simply the exact same thing that you probably do when you buy a new car or that you do when you buy a new house. It's simply that you, instead of paying full price and paying all in cash for a car or a house, you instead do a down payment and you get qualified for financing and you pay off the remaining amount of money between the down payment and the purchase price in monthly payments. So another word for seller financing is installment sales. The only difference is that typically when you buy a house, you have a seller that sells the house, and the seller wants $400,000 for the house, and you are the buyer, you don't have $400,000. So what you do is involve a third party, a financing company. In that case, the financing company is going to give you a loan, but the financing company basically gives a $400,000 payment to the seller minus down payment. So if you put $50,000 down, the seller gets $50,000 from you. The seller also gets $350,000 from the financing company. To the seller is cashed out, and the seller is done with the deal. Now what the left over, you own the property, and you now owe $350,000 to the financing company. Well, that's a little bit different in seller financing, because in seller financing, the financing company and the seller is the same person. And that's really it. If you think about it, so if you are the seller, instead of selling the property and getting cashed out, when you offer seller financing, what you essentially do is you're saying like, yes, dear Mr. Buyer, I'm selling this property to you for $100,000, but I'm allowing you to, instead of giving me $100,000 right now, I'm allowing you to pay me $20,000 down and then make monthly payments of $1,000 a month for the next 25 years and pay that loan off in monthly installments. That's all it is. It's as simple as that. It's the same thing as if you give your buddy a loan and your buddy pays it off in monthly payments to you. No difference whatsoever. However, there is some things to consider when doing seller financing. The first thing to consider is what's called the Dodd-Frank Act. So the Dodd-Frank Act is that big financial, thousands, if not tens of thousands of pages of documents that was created by Congress after the big financial meltdown in 2008, 2009. So Congress basically says, you know what? This happened because there's no regulation around financing. People were giving liar loans. People were giving loans with no payments for 2 years. People were giving loans with 1% interest rates, and then it would jump into 6, 7, 8% interest rates. All this kind of crazy things. There was no earning requirements. There was no income requirements. I mean, there was none of these things that anyone ever cared of during that time period. As a result, people that were basically unemployed were picking up $1 million properties because all they needed to say is like, yep, I can afford it, and nobody ever checked on it. Well, obviously that was a bad situation and it led to a big meltdown in real estate. So afterwards, government decided that they're going to put in some regulations. One of the regulations is what I talked about at the beginning of the video. It's the fact that if you do seller financing deals, or if you give more than a couple of 3 loans a year, then you have to actually make sure that the buyer of the property that you agree with the seller financing on actually qualifies for the loan. Some of these qualifications are, for example, that their loan to income ratio needs to be below a certain threshold. So in other words, if their income is $10,000 a month, obviously let's pick a number, their loan payments that they're making on their car, on their home, on their second home, on their second car, whatever loan payments they have, cannot be more than around 40% of their income. So if you now allow them to pay a piece of land or a house or anything off in monthly payments, you now need to make sure that you get the information from them and figure out what are their loan payments, what else do they pay, and really make sure that you do a proper underwriting. Now that's a ton of work. As a result, what most house flippers do when they do seller financing, they bring in a loan person that is qualified to that and it has what's called a mortgage originator's license, and that basically underwrites that person properly. But it's still a ton of work. But as I mentioned, there's a loophole here. And the loophole here is that the Dodd-Frank Act only covers and concerns itself with residential properties. As a matter of fact, let me be more specific, with residential dwellings. Now, what is a dwelling? A dwelling is a residential dwelling as defined by Regulation Z, and if you look it up, Regulation Z is some other regulation, that is a residential structure of 1 to 4 units. So in other words, you fall under that category if you do seller financing for homes, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, a fixed mobile homes fall underneath. Anything that's a residential structure between 1 and 4 units falls in that category. However, what does not fall into that category is land. And also what does not fall into the category is commercial and industrial properties. So if you have an industrial, let's say if you have a warehouse, you can sell it with seller financing. You have an office building, you can sell it with seller financing. You have a multifamily property as a commercial property, more than 4 units, you can sell it with seller financing. And not just once, but again and again and again without falling under the category. And most importantly, you can do it with land. So again, my wife and I have flipped over 4,000 pieces of land. We've done over 1,000 seller financing transactions. Not a single one did we have to jump through the Dodd-Frank hoops. Not a single one did we have to measure if that person can afford it based on the payment to income ratio. Not a single time did we have to fill out any government forms because land is outside of Dodd-Frank. So seller financing is very, very simple, particularly if you do it with an asset class that is not full of regulations like houses are. But whichever way you do it, it's a very simple strategy where you basically say, hey, Mr. Buyer, instead of paying me off all the way and in full, simply I'm allowing you to pay down a portion of what the agreed upon purchase price or sale price is and allow you to pay the rest of the money in monthly payments. Now, here's a couple of extra benefits for that. The reason why seller financing is so freaking profitable, particularly when you compare it to wholesaling, is 2 things. Number 1, sale price, and number 2, interest rate. Here's the thing. A typical house deal works such. You put a $100,000 house under contract for $55,000, you sell it to somebody for $65,000. You make $10,000 in a deal. Great. Or you take a $500,000 property for $300,000 and you sell it to a fix and flipper for $330,000, make $30,000. Great. When you do seller financing, you don't have to go discount the price that much. What you do is, if you go to seller financing, particularly with land, you can sell the land almost at market value because there's nothing to fix in the first place. You sell it almost at market value. So instead of taking that property that you put under contract for $25,000 and sell it for $55,000 and make a $30,000 profit, if it's worth $100,000, you go take that $100,000 property that you put under contract for $25,000, you sell it for $90,000, and you get a $25,000 down payment, which is only about 30%, and then you get $1,000 a month for the next 20 years, and you received not a $30,000 profit, but what you received is a $200,000 profit. Because if you look at it, if you receive $1,000 a month for 20 years, that's $12,000 a year. That's $120,000 in 10 years. That's $240,000 over the next 10 years. That's the power of seller financing done right. Instead of wholesaling at a lower price, you get to sell the property at a much higher price. Therefore, you have extra profit. And on top of it, on that extra profit, you're now collecting 10, 12, 15% interest per year. And all of it together turns into this boost of a 10x profit compared to a wholesale. So I love seller financing, particularly on land, because on land there's no fix and flip, there's no additional expenses. You simply choose, do I sell it cheap and make a quick cash profit, or I sell it more expensive and get seller financing, get cash flow, but 3x, 5x, 9x, or even 10x my profits on the deal. So if you enjoyed that, very simply, then make sure you subscribe, but also I want to give you a gift. If you're interested in figuring out how to get those deals at pennies on a dollar, how to sell them with seller financing, then I have a free land blueprint for you. Just simply go to landblueprint.com and download a free 30-day blueprint that shows you exactly how to make these kind of deals happen. And it does talk about seller financing too. All right, thank you very much.